Atenção para o toque de 5 segundos. Alô, aventureiros do YouTube. Aqui quem vos fala é Paulo Auris, comandante da Road Ship Kolakoração. A cobosa minha está parada e como está parada eu resolvi então passar alguns vídeos de minhas viagens fora do Brasil que eu fiz em 2012 e eu vou mostrar agora um tour que eu fiz no rio Tâmisa. Vocês podem ver aí, o barco está parado exatamente no pier que fica em frente à torre do Big Ben, em frente também à estação do Westminster. O barco sai desse pier, do Westminster, ele atravessa o rio Tâmisa e vai lá na London Eye. Na London Eye ele faz uma primeira parada. Nessa primeira parada algumas pessoas descem e fazem um tour lá no Olho de Londres e outras sobem lá, porque desceram no barco anterior e seguem em frente. E assim o barco vai descendo o rio, passando em vários pontos turísticos. E nesses pontos eles param e pessoas descem, pessoas sobem, certo? E continua até Oxford. Nós vamos passar pela London Bridge, pela Tower Bridge, vamos passar pelo templo lá de São Paulo, que é a Catedral de São Paulo, também muito bonito, arquitetura bonita. Eu aconselho até que lá vocês deixem para fazer esse tour na volta, porque é um pouco demorado, né? Quem vai mesmo para curtir mesmo, fazer, olhar, ver, entrar lá dentro, visitar, demora um pouquinho. Então deixa para fazer na volta. Muita gente faz isso. Há pessoas que são mais orientadas. Bom, então vocês vão ver aí muitas arquiteturas bonitas, antigas. Vocês vão ver arquiteturas modernas. Existem prédios todos de vidro. Existem prédios que na época ainda estavam construindo um edifício que era assim, uma torre muito bonita. Chega lá no final, parece até uma antena assim, dessas futurísticas. Vocês vão ver a prefeitura de Londres, que também tem um formato assim de um capacete. Tem um edifício que parece um rádio antigo, certo? E tem que é todo de vidro. Inclusive o guia faz até uma piadinha, que é lá que eles dão treinamento aos limpadores de janela lá de Londres. Tá assim engraçado, né? Uma atenção pessoal, mas eu não achei muita graça não. Ele também faz piadinha quando chega na London Eye. O tempo todo, o cara tem que ser um animador, né? Além de ser um guia, certo? Normal. Mas eu deixei uma parte toda no som original, não é de muito boa qualidade, porque vocês vão ver que estava ventando, então muito ruído, barulho do motor do barco, os próprios turistas e tagarelas, né, que ficam conversando. Mas aí vai rolando e ele vai explicando, dá perfeitamente para ouvir, porque ele fala no microfone, tem certa distribuição de som. Eu não estava muito próximo, estava um pouco afastado para poder ficar assim o mais longe possível, para poder pegar, filmar melhor, não ter muita gente na minha frente, certo? E aí eu fui e fiz esse vídeo em 2012, certo? E vou apresentar agora. Espero sinceramente que vocês gostem. Como eu disse anteriormente, não foi um vídeo feito assim com esse propósito de dar dicas para turistas, mas foi mais um registro que eu fiz para me recordar no futuro. Aí, como eu estou sem nada para fazer, porque minha Kolakoração está no estaleiro, eu resolvi editar esses vídeos, resolvi publicá-los como uma espécie de treinamento para mim melhorar na edição de vídeo e em outras coisas a mais. Eu espero que vocês gostem e obrigado, um abraço. Vamos em frente, que atrás vem gente.
Kiss the bride, and it's all downhill from there. Ladies and gentlemen, quite literally. Now in front of us, the first bridge on the journey is the Charing Cross Railway Bridge. Unique in the sense that as we pass underneath one railway system, we also pass above one, because 35 feet below the bridge we have the London Underground. The Bakerloo and Northern Tube lines run directly underneath the bridge. The two walkways either side, the Hungerford and Jubilee walkways, built for the Queen's Golden Jubilee. That was 50 years on the front. Once the is coming up very shortly on the right hand side, you will see the Royal Festival Hall. Built in 1951 for the Great Festival, inside this building is a very fine concert venue, and some of the many artists who are played there include the great Frankie Sinatra, Shirley Bassey, and of course Michael Jackson at the Royal Festival Hall.
Michael Jackson.
Now taking your attention off to your left, you will see London's oldest monument, the 18-metre stone obelisk. It's called the Cleopatra's Needle, given to the British by a very grateful Egyptian government for Admiral Lord Nelson's victory over the French fleets and Napoleon at the Battle of the River Nile. It's over 3,500 years old, older than London itself. The two are actually facing in the wrong direction. They're facing the stone obelisk, admiring it. What they should be doing is facing outwards. Now fast approaching, we have the Waterloo Road Bridge, also known to us on the river as the Lady Bridge, because it was built and constructed by a 90% female labour workforce during the Second World War. At the time, all the men were out fighting king and country. Now coming up shortly once through the bridge, off to the right, you'll see what looks to be a large concrete multi-storey car park. Well, this is in fact our pride and joy, the National Theatre. Now inside there, it boasts 3 of the world's finest theatres, but it has been voted for 10 years running by leading architects to be the ugliest building on the banks of the Thames. For obvious reasons, I'm sure we can all see the National Theatre. Now slightly in front of us, on the left, you'll see a small white ship with some round portholes and a white canopy up on the top. And this is the former Royal Barge, the old St. Catherine. That is the vessel that the Queen used to use for her trips on the Thames. Now sadly, it has been made redundant. It's now a very exclusive bar and restaurant, and it's called the Yacht at Temple Pier. The former Royal Barge on the left hand side. Now keeping on the left, just in front of us, the larger white ship with the cream funnel, the HMS Wellington, a former gunship for the Royal New Zealand Navy. Now very shortly, at the back of it, or the stern of it, you will make out a stone archway. It's called the Temple Arch or the Temple Gate. And what this is a boundary line between the two cities. The city of Westminster that we're about to leave, and the square mile city of London that we're about to enter. The Temple Arch on the left. Now Now in front of us on the right, the red brick building, this is Stamford Wharf, W-H-A-R-F. Now take the word wharf, it's an acronym. It stands for the words warehouse at river front. And this used to be an old cold meat storage warehouse. It has been converted and is now the sum of the Thameside's most luxurious apartments. Each apartment is sold for in between £2 to £3 million per apartment. Now the glass roof is a restaurant owned by Harvey Nichols, and sometimes we see people standing there on the balcony. We think they just received their bill and they're contemplating committing suicide. But to be fair folks, we just don't know. And the landmark, the Oxo Tower. Now this river is the Queen's Royal Highway, and it is therefore illegal to advertise on the banks of the River Thames. But they got around this very cleverly by incorporating their logo into their glass design, and they get free advertising on the river all year round. Now on the left hand side, just in front, the small Gothic looking building with the green sloping roof, the City of London School for Boys. Many famous prime ministers once lived here, including Lord Asquith and the great wartime leader, Sir Winston Churchill. Looking between the 5 arched windows and carved into the stonework in between are 4 of England's top scholars throughout history. Now from left to right we have Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare and Sir John Milton, the old City of London School for Boys. Now here we have the Blackfriars group of bridges, the first one being the Blackfriars Road Bridge, opened back in 1868 by Queen Victoria. Then we have the Blackfriars Railway Bridge, currently undergoing, as you can see, a £500 million refurb. They're ready for the Olympic Games here in London this summer. Now you may or may not know, but we're spending billions and billions of pounds of tax-paying money in prep for those games. But if you ask me, in my opinion, that's a very small price to pay for 2 bronze medals. But that is just my opinion. Now in front of us, on the right-hand side, the building with the large brick chimney, the old Bankside Power Station. Now it has been converted and it is now home to the Tate Modern Art Gallery. It's also free to enter. And mark my words, if you've been there, then you'll know exactly why it's free to enter. Now talking of art and masterpieces, in very fine contrast, in my opinion, on the left, towering the skyline above the buildings, you'll see the golden ball, the cross, and the blue dome of Wren's masterpiece, St Paul's Cathedral. It stands at 365 feet tall, and it took Wren 35 years to construct. Now Wren himself is buried here. He's entombed in the crypts in the basement, alongside Admiral Lord Nelson and the Iron Duke, the Duke of Wellington, and Princess Diana and Prince Charles. They got married there back in 1981. That's Wren's masterpiece, St Paul's. Now in front of us, slightly on the right hand side, just behind the pier, you will see a white branded building from thatched roof. And this is a one-to-one exact working replica of William Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. This was the dream of a man called Sir Woodmaker to rebuild the Globe at its site. Now sadly passed away. He died 6 months before the completion date. But thanks to Sam, there it stands, William Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. Now in front we have the Southwark Road Bridge, the least used bridge to span the Thames. Least used because when it was built, no one took into account the approach roads, and it is therefore lost in the back streets of London. Hence why the bridge is so empty. No one can actually find it to use it, the Southwark Road Bridge. Now coming up shortly on the left, once through the bridge, you'll see two traditional Thames working barges filled with great containers. Inside these containers is 70% of London's household rubbish. At high water, in around half an hour's time, they're towed down to a landfill site in Essex, a place called Mucking, and is then dumped there for land reclamation. Now more importantly, once through the bridge, on the right hand side, you'll see a small and very famous Thameside tavern. It's called the Anchor at Bankside. Now there has been a pub over there on that site for over 400 years. William Shakespeare himself, Charles Dickens and the diarist Samuel Pepys would have all used that particular tavern at one point years ago. The famous Anchor at Bankside. Now here we have the Cannon Street Railway Bridge, not particularly interesting, so I must move on. But once through it on the right, just in front of us, especially for the small boys and girls, you'll see London's very own pirate ship. Now this is a working replica of Sir Francis Drake's ship, the Golden Pirate. That is the vessel that Drake used to circumnavigate the globe and become the first Englishman to do so. It took Drake 4 years with a crew of 80 cutthroat sailors. Mooredale Alpha Floating Museum opens 7 days a week. Admission is also free. Now in front we have the world's famous London Bridge. London Bridge is falling down. Well, it's not now, but of course it was years ago. Now this one is the 5th one to expand here in the last 2,000 years. Opened back in 1963 by the Queen. Now the first one was made 2,000 years ago by the Romans and was made from wood. That one burned down during the Great Fire of London. Now talking of the Great Fire, coming up very shortly, once through the bridge, on your left, in the gap, in the first 2 buildings, have your cameras at the ready, because you might catch a very brief glimpse of Wren's monument to the Great Fire of London. It's a large stone column with a golden ball or flame upon the top, built to resemble a candle, which started the Great Fire back in 1666 in a royal bakery in Pudding Lane. So there it is there on the left, Wren's monument to the Great Fire of London. Now keeping on the left, you'll see a small blue glass building. And this blue glass building is the International Training Centre for window cleaners. Can we all see that? Just making sure that somebody out there somewhere is listening to a single word that I'm saying. That's it. Now talking of glass, on a much more serious note, on the right, the last construction. It's called the Shard of Glass. Now when complete this summer, it's going to stand 1,017 feet tall. That's 89 stories high. So this will be, when completed, the tallest building in Europe. The Shard of Glass at London Bridge. Now slightly in front of London's very own warship, the HMS Belfast. Built in Belfast in the same shipyard as the ill-fated Titanic, she was the first ship to fire her guns at the D-Day landings on the Normandy beaches, and she last saw action during the Korean campaign. Now she consists of 12 6-inch guns. That's 6 guns at forward, 6 guns at aft. Each gun can fire a 100-weight shell or a small screaming child approximately 14 land miles. More than our front-facing museum, there's 8 decks on board to explore, from the engine rooms right up to the captain's bridge, and children under 16 do go aboard for free. So it does make for a cheap fare in London for the whole family if you have the time aboard the HMS Belfast. Highly recommend. Now in front of us on the left, the infamous Tower of London. Now so many things this time. It's been a Royal Mint, a Royal Zoo, observatory, a prison. It's now home to the Queen's Crown Jewels and over 1,000 years of English and French history. But it's most famous for a place of execution and torture. Just in front of us on the wall, you'll see the words, "Entry to the Traitors' Gates." Now years ago, if you were a traitor and found guilty at the Palace of Westminster, then you would have been rowed down the river by a Thames waterman, like myself or the captain, row through the archway into the tower, then had your head chopped off by the means of a large rusty axe and chopping blade. Now if you're somebody famous, for example Guy Fawkes, they would have put your head onto a large steel spike, then put it on the old London Bridge as a warning to any other would-be traitors. The last man to suffer this fate, well, he was a very, very famous and brave Scotsman by the name of William Wallace, also known as Mel Gibson from that great film, The Braveheart. Now in front of us coming up shortly on the right, you'll get a very fine photo shot of the Tower Road Bridge. Built back in 1894 by Sir John Wolfe Barry, it's one of a kind, part suspension, part bascule. The bascules are the 2 centre pieces and they can be raised in 90 seconds for special occasions and larger vessels. Only ever failed to open once, on the opening ceremony in front of a very embarrassed Queen Victoria. The boat came up the river, they pressed the button, the bridge did not open, and the boat actually smashed straight into the bridge. And that's where she said the famous phrase, "We are not immune." So there it is in front of us, the Tower Road Bridge. Now very shortly we're about to make our first stop alongside Tower Pier for the Tower of London. So a few very swift, very important instructions. The next stop is Greenwich. So for Greenwich, you must stay seated aboard the boat. To return straight back to Westminster, you must change boats at boarding point number 2 to return straight back to Westminster. Now about safety, very important safety, in fact fundamental, and that is our job. Take your photographs by all means, please do. But once you've taken your photos, can you please remain seated until we're safely
as I used to. Yeah, that's just the raise out there. A typical example I was saying about the warehouses down here is on the right hand side, Butler's Wharf. Butler's Wharf at one time was the largest tea warehouse here in London. Ships would come up the river and berth on those jetties there and discharge their chests of tea into the warehouses, where it would have been blended, it would have been boxed up and then distributed around the country. It's all luxury apartments now. If you look over there, you can see all the restaurants over there as well. onto the two of the cantina, all bar one, Chop House, Browns, all owned by the restaurateurs, Terence Conrad. And that white building between the warehouses, that's a museum for art and design. Now quite a bit of filming's been done in this area over the years. And if you go behind those buildings there, a lot of the back streets are still narrow and cobbled. And they do a lot of filming's been done in this area. And this little creekway down there on the right is where Charles Dickens got his inspiration to write his famous novel Oliver Twist. This is where Fagin had his lair of pickpocket boy thieves. And when you get abreast of it, you can see it's still got a Dickensian look about the place. They've even left some of the old cranes on the sides of the buildings when it was once a working dock. But as I said, filming is still done in this area, especially for television series like The Hustle, Bill, Knock, London's Burn, all those sorts of programmes are often filmed in and about this area, known as Burns. Over on the left hand side, that's the old East End of London, all that area to the left is known as Wapping. Now, just a little further down there, them Georgian buildings are. Well, that was once a dockway where you could go into the London dock at the entrance. It's all filled in there, but those buildings on the pier end there, they were once on the dock. But the larger one there on the lower side there, that's the London home of the actor Michael Crawford. And the one this side, on the upper side here, behind the trees, that's where the Queen lives. Helen Mirren played the Queen. Oliver's Wharf next door. The American singer, actress, sure, she had a big house in the building. She's not in there anymore, but she had the penthouse there for a number of years. But look a little further on, there's another warehouse there with 3 red balconies on the front with the letter E in the apex. It's known as Execution Dock, where a notorious judge called Hanging Judge Jeffreys would execute pirates. And the method of execution was on the low water. They would chain the pirates to the wall, then let the tide pass up over their bodies 3 times. They call this cruel, sophisticated execution the Grace of Rock. One of the most famous pirates to be executed this way in 1701 was Captain William Kidd. You can see the police post here. This is the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Thames Division, which are the oldest uniformed police force in the world, formed in 1798 to combat piracy, smuggling that was rife on the River Thames back in those days. They was even formed before the land police, before the so-called boat. But if you look behind the pier there, there's a small warehouse they converted into a pub. And if you look at the name of it, you can see they've named it after the pirate. It's called the Captain Kidd. But back on the right hand side, all this area now is Rotherhithe, and just ahead of us there, you've got that church spire there, that's St Mary's. Now buried in the churchyard is a Captain Christopher Jones. He was the master of the pilgrim ship, the Mayflower. Now the Mayflower set south of Rotherhithe in 1620. It sailed round to the south coast of England, Southampton onto Plymouth, picking up the separatists, who later became known as the Pilgrim Fathers, and sailed across to the New World we now call the United States of America. Now coming up in between the buildings here shortly is a little pub, which has been named after the ship. It's called the Mayflower. If you look at the weather vane on its roof, you will see a little bronze replica of that little ship. There it is, just going in between the buildings there. 4 years after that epic voyage, the ship did return here, and this is where it was broken up. They say some of the timbers from that ship, the building of furniture that's in the picture. On the left hand side you see some of the original old warehouses back there. Some still got their names on. King Henry there, gun walls. A little further on we've got New Crane and Metropolitan Wall. This was all busy with shipping along here up to the early 70s, but due to different handling of cargo, containerisation, these warehouses couldn't cope with that. They could maybe done. Eventually, they've been converted into apartments. On the right here we've got this round red brick building. This is a ventilation shaft for the high road tunnel, the 3 road tunnel pass beneath the River Thames. It's on an old dock entrance here. This is the entrance to the Surrey Commercial Docks, which was mainly timber dock. But it's all finished now. And they've even built a pub on the pier there, the Old Salt Quay. That's the newest pub that's been built in this part of London. But it just happens to stand right opposite the oldest one. Because over on the left hand side there, we had the Prospect of Whitby, dates back to 1520. Which was called then the Devil's Tavern. They got that name because of the sorts of characters that used these taverns back in those days. Thieves, pirates, smugglers, estate agents. Got its name the Prospect in the early 1800s after an old coaling colony called the Prospect. Came around here from the port of Whitby in Yorkshire with coal crab stations. Obviously the crews used these taverns when they came round it, but the Prospect got lost in a storm in the North Sea and went through town trip. The crew who were lost, they changed the name, that's how its name, Prospect of Whitby. There, also the dock entrance there, that was one where the shipping went into the London dock. And the other shaft there was the tunnel.
I'm here.
I'll tell you a little bit about the River Thames now. A lot of people ask us about the river.
Here behind the river.
Well, the source of the river is up in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire. It runs for 215 miles to the open sea. The last 90 is and we have 2 tides in London every 24 hours. Flood tide and ebb tide. Flood for 5 hours and ebbs out for 7 hours. That's with a rise of water of up to 7.5 metres. Now, it's just getting to its high water mark now. It'll soon be turning and running back out to sea there. You can see the boss line round the wall there where the high goes. Another old wharf here, Globe Wharf. That was once a very busy rice mill. But that's now, as you see, apartments. Just ahead of us on the left hand side where all those trees are, it's part of a large garden. You don't normally see gardens in this part of London. That's the former home, the film directors of David Lee. Directed films like Lawrence of Arabia, Passage to India, Bridge over the River Kwai, Dr. Zhivago, all those sorts of films he directed. It's all one property, they're not flats. David Lean, passed away about 10 years ago now, and that was once a tea warehouse. You've got dock entrance there, Limehouse Marina, that's an upmarket name. That's the entrance to the Regent's Canal dock. Now, if you go through that lock there, go across the basin of the dock, there's 2 locks that take you into the Grand Union Canal that goes right through central London. Which was used commercially to the mid-70s. But it's only used by pleasure craft now. It does make a nice holiday, especially at this time of year, to work up all through the locks, right through central London. You need to go right through it. And that building on the pier head there, which was once the dockmaster's office, now belongs to Gordon Ramsay. That's one of his restaurants here, called the Narrow. This area to the left is known as Limehouse. When the docks road up here, this is Chinatown. This is where the Chinese first settled when they came to London. It became quite a notorious area. because they set out all the gambling, the dens were here, and opium dens. But as the docks gradually closed down, they moved up into Soho. It's all been redeveloped now. There's a little road on there, made famous for Charles Dickens. He stayed here for a while and wrote his novel, Our Mutual Friend. He described that little pub in the novel as the Six Jolly Fellowship of Paupers. Now this large development we're approaching, this is Canary Wharf. It's been built in the old South West India docks. This has been under construction now since the mid-80s. The skyscraper built with the Pinnacle Tower is now #1 Cabot Square, and that at one time was the tallest building in the UK. It's now been superseded by the one at London Bridge, the Shard of Glass, which is over 1,000 feet. Now you can see the light flashing on top of this one. That's because it's in the flight path of London City Airport, just a few miles downriver in the redundant Royal Docks. You see the banks there, you've got HSBC, Citibank, Credit Suisse, you've got JP Morgan, American Bankers, all down here. It's quite a big financial centre here. Quite a busy place during the weekdays. There's also a large shopping complex here. But if you look through the gap in the buildings here, they're just coming into view now. It's the yellow support piece to the O2 Arena. It's just through the gap in the view. We don't go all that far around. It's all usually busy with down there, ships, barges. All these walls are shut down now and they're replaced with these apartments. What I'll tell you about these, they're very expensive to buy. Well, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to switch off for 5 minutes till we get a little further on. When we get down to the next bend there, we'll have Greenwich inside now. Tell you a bit about Greenwich and the surrounding areas. Is that all okay? You can see that dome there, that's the Greenwich Observatory and Flamstead House. Now on Flamstead House there's a T-bar, got that orange ball on it. That's a visual timepiece. So 5 to 1 each day, the ball raises to the top of the mast. 1 o'clock that will drop. That's where we get 1 o'clock GMT. The 0 line of longitude, it cuts through Greenwich, and that is there is a brown strip running through the observatory indicating the time. But this here do here at Greenwich, National Maritime Museum behind the college buildings. It's the markets in the town square. There's antique and craft shops if you want to go ashore there. So it's well worth a visit just for now because the boats run back from here every half an hour. It's 5 to the hour and 25 minutes past the hour. The last one is at 5 to 6. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the